Okay, I'm Glen Johnson. We're going to talk about teams it takes to operate what we've been talking about, our stations and our radios and networks. I'm Glen Johnson, W0GJ, and I have a team assembled here. Don, N1DG, who was just our last moderator, and Gregg, W6IZT, and Adrian, we've just heard from, KO8SCA. And we're going to talk about, building teams, what's important about it. There's different teams within a team. Everybody has things to do. There's all kinds of things we'll talk about here. And we got to talk about the goals. Is it a classic DXpedition where it's full life support, where you take your tent and food and everything on shore? Or do you rent a hotel for this DXpedition? I've been on both. And what about a contest DXpedition? Most of those are in resorts or hotels. I've been on contest expeditions in Africa where it's tent and generator, just like a DXpedition. And then there's a hybrid DXpedition, which is what's developing now, and that's a few remote people that are on the island or near the island, and then a lot of remote operators that do it. So this next slide, we're going to turn to Gregg, W6IZT, and this slide, or this topic, could take a whole weekend to develop. So I give him 30 seconds, 3 or 4 minutes here to go over this. But,
well, thank you, Glen. Appreciate that. So the idea, plan, reality, as we go through this, there's a lot of variations, as Glen kind of pointed out. The classic contest DXpedition, you're at a hotel, you're at a resort, you're at a house. Generally, these trips are staffed by a team that knows each other very well. They've probably operated together before. They're bringing their equipment with them on the plane as checked baggage, and it doesn't have the degree of complexity of what we would call the classic DXpedition. And there's a lot of variables in the classic DXpedition. It could be a small team, which is the trend today because of escalating costs, or it could be a large team. A small team, you may elect to ship some of your equipment as air freight, which can be a challenge, or you may end up carrying it. Like I looked at the Andaman team that was at VU4 a month ago. They had, I think, 50 suitcases lined up at the airport. I believe it was in Amsterdam, and they ran into problems. They'd done everything correctly, but they hit some snags on getting their equipment on the plane. Anything can happen. So each DXpedition has its set of challenges. Each approach has its set of challenges. The hybrid remote DXpedition, it's almost like you have two teams. You have your on-island team, and you have your remote team. To a degree, they operate somewhat independently, but they have to be synchronized. So there's a set of challenges there. I've been on expeditions where my equipment was on the expedition, but I was off island, which was great because I had an opportunity to watch what was transpiring. And then I've been on island, and I learned that if you have a hybrid DXpedition where you have on island and off island, when you're on island, you really don't have the time to support the off island team. And that it has to kind of support itself. You have to have experts there that can take care of the remote equipment, the ribs, so they operate efficiently as well. Schedule and deadlines. You can break this down into any number of pieces that you want to. So you have a schedule. The planning part of a DXpedition is where 95% of the work takes place. When you step on the airplane, the work is almost all done. So there's deadlines in the scheduling process, whether it's your permits, whether it's funding, whether it's equipment procurement, or whether it's packing. There's a set of deadlines that all have to fall into place. And I like to try and build a lot of padding into the schedules because what can go wrong, as Adrian pointed out earlier, will go wrong. And as Glen has said in the past, Murphy is always on your team. So this last trip we were on, we opted to ship our gear to Rotuma in August. And I faced a lot of criticism because why are you shipping so early? Well, we were using air freight, and our origin was in Atlanta. And our shipment started with the freight forwarder in Atlanta. It went by less than a truckload overland to LA. It was transferred to Qantas in LA. It flew from LA to Sydney, Sydney to Auckland, Auckland to Fiji. Now, what can go wrong? Everything. And so the schedule was based upon getting the equipment into Fiji, and the boat from Fiji to Rotuma, when we shipped, ran once a month. And I wanted to be able to miss a boat shipment, miss 2 shipments, and still have the equipment get there. Well, the equipment got to Fiji in September, got to Rotuma a week before we arrived in November. So had we not taken such a conservative approach, we would have been sitting on Rotuma twiddling our thumbs. So logistics, and so you've got an expedition where you carry everything on a plane, and that's optimal, as long as you don't run into snags with your excess baggage. You have a situation where you're shipping in a container. The container goes from where you stage it to the freight forwarder, typically goes by rail to a port. We've shipped from Atlanta, where it's gone out of Savannah, or it's gone out of Long Beach. It can go either way. Then when it gets to the destination, it's the same kind of thing. It goes from a boat, it can get on a train. When we went to our trip to Beauvais, I believe the equipment went to Panama, and then went by train to somewhere in South America, and then by boat again to Punta Arenas. I don't recall all of the details, but it's complex. There's a lot of complexities in the logistics when planning. Yes, sir?
Did you also have to work with customs agents, especially in Fiji?
Oh yeah, that was a joy.
Allow you to pick up your equipment?
Well, when you're shipping that way, you touch on a very good point, is you typically don't have a representative that's representing your interests at the point of arrival. And there's always the potential of getting hit with taxes or tariffs. And so we ended up paying another $3,400 in value-added tax when our equipment got to Fiji. And when you ship and you don't carry your equipment, you're always running the risk of exposure to value-added tax. I know of another trip that went earlier last year. I believe that their hit was more on the order of about $9,000 or $10,000 at their destination, and I believe that they still have some equipment in country that they're trying to recover. So it's risky. I spent a lot of time with Don. He has a lot of experience in this, and we probably talked a couple times a week through late July and into September, just educating me on some of the variables and some of the risks that you can run into. Another thing that doesn't get talked about much is security, and not talking about so much security of your equipment, but security of the personnel. A lot of these places you go to aren't necessarily safe. And the threat is real. The last thing you want is to have somebody to venture out of the hotel or venture out of the compound you're staying in and run into some undesirables. And places I've been where security was a concern was Buenaventura, Colombia. We landed in Buenaventura, and we're in a van from the airport, and we hear gunshots almost constantly from the airport to the hotel. And somebody in the van asked why we're going so fast. And I thought immediately, well, the risk of getting kidnapped is much lower the faster you're going. We could not leave the hotel after dark under any circumstances, whether you were with a team member or not. When we were in Fiji, I didn't feel comfortable with any of the team members leaving the hotel, and I said, if you do leave the hotel, let me know when you're going, and always travel in twos. So it's just safety precautions as you take. I mean, Bob, W9AP, and I were in Ghana together, got the shirt on to show it, and I don't think we would have left our facility at any point in time under any circumstances, and we didn't the whole time we were there. I don't think anybody left and went to town. We stayed there for the entire week or 10 days that we were there.
And we got an armed guard at night.
Yes, you're carrying an AK-47. Responsibilities, this is a challenge because we're talking about, and I'm going to kind of two points here, is with a small team you have fewer people to delegate responsibilities to. One of the things that I learned early on in my DXpedition days, and fortunately I got to travel with some people who were very experienced and very knowledgeable, is it helps if you have what we call a +1, a skill set above and beyond being a good operator. And whether that's scheduling, expertise, logistics, technology, power, medical, sanitation in some cases, you try to delegate these responsibilities across multiple people, but with a big team of 10, 12 or 15, it's fairly easy. But with a small team of 6, you need to find people for that team who have multiple extra skill sets. But then one person should be in charge of that. And to Adrian's point about having an expert and a backup person, that's really important. Licensing and landing permits, this has been touched on. Ideally, you don't want to start the process until you have your landing permits and your licensing in hand. But sometimes the duration of the planning process doesn't permit you to do that. And so you're working this in parallel. You're beginning your planning, and I think it's always the case, is whether how much you invest in the planning process in advance of having your license or your permit. You know you're going to get it. Some places are more challenging than others. We're going to Saba in October this year on another youth-oriented trip. And the licensing was really simple. It happened in a matter of days, and that's not always the case. So you need to understand what you're up against there. There were no landing permits involved. The logistics are fairly simple. And so, compared to some other more difficult places to go to, it's pretty straightforward. So in financing, I'm going to interpret financing as fundraising. And as Don stated earlier, traditionally, historically, the team would end up, would be burdened with half of the cost of the trip. And that doesn't always work out. With these youth-oriented trips, we're trying to take a burden away and get as many young people on these trips as possible, so that model shifts a little bit. But the team members contribute some funding. Organizations such as the Northern California DX Foundation and clubs worldwide contribute money, and individuals do. I learned something really interesting in planning the trip to Rotuma was the behavior of the individual contributors. And this is something that I wanted to share because it wasn't apparent to me when I started this, was when you make an announcement about some aspect of your trip, and it comes out in the Daily DX and DX World on social media, the funding that announcement generates, 90% of that, whether it's the number of donations or the dollars, occurs within 12 hours of the press release. And then it tapers off down to nothing very quickly. And so whether we over-announced or under-announced, I think you can put out too much information too quickly and kind of flood the potential supporter base. But I found that periodic press releases was the way to continue to drive funding throughout the process of planning, logistics, and then execution of the expedition. And one thing that's not on here is that I'm going to touch on, I don't think it's in any of the slides, is it's really desirable to try and plan your expedition, schedule an expedition around a contest, because it just creates another level of competitiveness, interest. You'll work people out of the contest, and then the same people are going to work you again in the contest. And it just brings another dimension of enjoyment too. After all, it's been supposed to be fun.
Okay, now we'll go to selecting our team members. And I've asked Adrian to address this.
Okay, putting together a team is not as easy as it sounds. Of course, the tendency is to, talk to your friends and have as many of those as possible in the team. But the success of the expedition requires a lot more than that. First of all, you have people that have different skills and people that have different interests. some are very good at CW and they don't care about SSB. Some others are just there to do, FT8. Others have interest in, work in a specific area around the world, such as, their home country or something similar, or maybe a particular band. I'm only interested in 6 meters or 160. You would need a little bit of everything. So multilingual in ham radio world is finding operators who can do multiple things. I love CW, but I'll do SSB if I am required, and there's nobody to cover that slot. And if the FT8 operator seems to be busy with other things, maybe a stomach flu or something, then others have to chip in and be able to do that, regardless if you like it or not. Remember, this is called a team and not an operator. And so multilinguals are very important. Now, believe it or not, actually, from all the qualities a team member should have is their personality. Because, if you don't have a skill or another, there's probably some other people in the team that might have similar skills. But if you're a difficult person to deal with, where you say, well, no matter what, I gotta go to sleep at 9 p.m. and this is it. I can't operate if I'm not sitting in a chair. I'm not doing night shifts, or, items that are impossible to overcome. If you want to go to sleep at 9 p.m. and that's when the propagation is and you need everyone in the team, that's not good. And so personality is something that's the most desirable component in a person, or quality I should say, to be part of the team. And then there's the compatibility. Well, it's called a team because each and every individual cannot achieve the goal. But when you put all these skills together, this compatibility allows the team to get to their goal. And so people should be, or the team members should be able to work together. A simple example, for example, is, okay, I'm an engineer and I know all these things and I want to be the guy behind giving orders of what the others should do. Well, now we're building antennas and we need somebody to hold the hammer, or, look and go and fetch, the tools or the screws, or find a particular cable in some case, or maybe even make coffee and give it to everyone in the team that's been up there, building antennas. You cannot be the type of person that says, I'm not doing this or I'm doing that. People should be compatible. Also, this is similar to what's being discussed when you go and do sailing, when you do blue water sailing, crossing the oceans. They say that your true friends are the ones that are still friends after a voyage like this, because then you find out exactly their personality. It's the time when, in a small space you have nothing to hide or can't hide anything. And also it's the time when, one of the rules are laugh at somebody else's joke, even if it's not a good one. Leave politics and religion at home. And items like this that basically make people focus on the goal of the team, which is making the expedition successful, which means making QSOs. You don't want to bring items onto the table that have nothing to do with what is being required of the team. Also, a team is not a democracy. If we sit there in the middle of nowhere on some island in the Pacific or the most remote place on Earth and you start voting on what do we do next, things are not going to go that easily. And so that's why there's a team leader or a group of team leaders. They know the details inside out. It's just like in the army. You might be the soldier and don't like the fact that you're told to do this or that. But you, as the guy, as the soldier, you do not have a bigger view or the whole view of what's going on out there. So that's why leadership is important. If, for example, you want to be successful, let's say, on a difficult band like 160 or 6 meter, you cannot make it a democracy and have everybody operate that band just because everybody needs to get excited on that particular band. In order to, you have a very short window of opportunity where you are responsible for making those cues. Propagation might not be every day, and the opening might be 3 hours every 5 days. And so the team leaders should decide, you're going and you operate that particular band at that particular time because we said so, because we need to make sure that the goal is reached. And so line of authority is important. Also, you have to set up expectations at the beginning. Tell everybody what's being expected of. And in a small expedition, 3 or 4 friends getting together on some island to have some fun, you discuss in front of a beer and say, hey, we'll try to make, 20,000 QSOs, and if we make more, then that's fine. You bring that radio, you bring the other radio, and if you forget something at home or something gets lost, not a big deal. But in a larger expedition where the stakes are higher and the expense is a lot larger to get to that island, things are more complicated. You have to set up an written agreement, or people can't say later on, I didn't know about this. Or specific examples. You go on the expedition and everybody brings their own radio, and your radio is going to end up at the bottom of the ocean. Who pays for it? Well, the guy next to you will say, that's your bad luck. Why do I pay for your radio? Your radio was 3 years old. If I give you money from my own pocket, you're going to get a new radio. That's not fair. And so all these simple and yet details that nobody wants to think about before the expedition need to be set up front. And so they also set up the expedition in such a way so that politics in the team do not prevent, or shouldn't happen, but if they do happen, should not prevent the team from reaching their goals. You might say, well, I'm from North America and the big demand is on the East Coast, and we should spend, more time working East Coast than spending time working, Western Europe. Well, that's why all these expectations need to be set up first and set up in a team agreement beforehand. And that brings us to the financing options, financing details. Simple things like buying insurance. Well, that costs money, but if you don't buy it and stuff happens, then who's going to pay for it? What happens if you say that, we're going to go on the expedition, everybody shells out $5,000 and that should cover our expenses. And then you end up in some place in Africa and the customs officer says, unless you pay, $5,000 in custom fees, you guys are not getting to operate anything. Where do you get the extra $5,000 that you haven't budgeted for? Well, if there's an agreement that says everyone puts the money down, and if there's money from the QSL cards later on, then we get those money. If there's no money from the QSL cards, then this is it. And those items need to be decided up front to make sure that there are no issues later on. All right. Well, the good operation teams, this is the perfect scenario, the one taken up from the book, where everything works together, oil down. You know what to do, I know what to do, and he knows what to do. We get there and we work together and things are getting accomplished. You hold the pliers, I bring the hammer, you bring the components for the antennas. According to our plan, the antenna should be ready in 20 minutes. If things work out this way, then we got a well-oiled machine. Well, some people have been to previous expeditions, and you know that the expedition is not a vacation. If you want to sit down and relax and have your coffee in the morning or look at the sunset, that's not for you. sunset in the ham radio world means gray line. Gray line means QSOs. That means this is when you get your all your energy into making QSOs. You got to plan things so nothing would happen during those best times, meaning you're not going to spend the time for anything else but making QSOs. Also, planning things is also important. You say, well, if things don't work out according to our best case scenario, what do we do? Well, we have a scaled down version of the first scenario, and we do less, but we still do something. You might fight forces that you have no control over. One of them might be weather. Well, always is weather. The second one might be people that you're dealing with. Again, that example of the custom officer that you have to convince that you're actually going to have fun in a vacation. This is no commercial aspect. And the guy looks in your bag and sees more wires than he ever saw in his life. Well, how are you going to convince him that this is a vacation or not? Well, if you plan this properly, you have your schmoozing officer. That's a dedicated person in the team that knows how to schmooze with people and convince them to do what they don't want to do, but you want them to do that for you. And then you have the plan C. When things go really bad, then what do? Simple example, 2023 expedition to Bouvet. Well, plan A didn't work out. Weather was not cooperating. Well, we can sit on the boat and wait for the weather to happen. Well, that wasn't too good. We wanted to get off that ship after a few weeks at sea. Trust me, you want to feel land under your feet. But the problem is, if you do so, then you cannot bring a lot of equipment on shore. So plan B didn't work either. And then you go with plan C, the crazy one that you thought you're never going to be using it. You swim ashore, get a few radios in your pockets and get there and make a few QSOs just so that you don't feel bad that you spend all those money and things didn't work out. But it was a backup plan. It was, although not perfect, in the sense that you don't achieve the goal of the plan A, you still got on the shore, you made QSOs, you got back onto the boat and back home safely to tell the story. And that's a plan C that actually worked. So it's good to have a plan A, plan B, and plan C. Well, next is owning responsibilities. What is that? Well, you're given the task of configuring the radios and the computers. Well, don't study the manual when you get on the island. Be the guy that's the expert. I know you've been using this radio for a long time at your friend's place where he actually did all the work and you press just the buttons. Well, if you're that guy that's not really an expert, onto the responsibility and do your homework at home. That's why it's called homework. You basically open up the manual, see what happens. What if the radio is reset? What if the computer goes crazy? You need to know what to do and own that responsibility. Make sure that you don't disappoint your fellow team members. Well, the next one would be team first and selfishness aside. That's a tough one for certain people, especially for most of us getting to that age where you don't really change your behavior anymore, even though you might pretend you could do so. Well, what happens is, I'm the guy that does things this way, and I'm too old to change it, and so nothing is going to change. Well, that's not really good, because team first is important. That's why it's a team effort. You go there with a team, and so putting that your self-interest aside, it might not be easy, but you have to do it. Otherwise, not only you're going to get some team members that are a bit upset to having you around, you're definitely not going to get invited again. And certainly you will go home and everybody has you as the bad example in the stories, and you don't want to be famous for that. Well, the expedition, again, is not a vacation. You have to work overtime. Overtime, does that mean that you sleep 9 hours instead of 8? Overtime means that you sit and do that, work on that antenna until it's resonant, and it makes no difference. If it's raining, it's shining, you have to use the facilities, or you don't have the proper pliers, or a couple of screws been blown on by the wind. Well, you have to find a solution until things get done. You sit there with the antenna and say, well, a pipe is missing. Where is it? Well, if you can't find it, you got to figure something out. Maybe get a piece of wood and a piece of wire and, be the MacGyver of the team. If you do so, you might be the famous guy that saved the day. And you have a lot of days in the expeditions, and so you need a lot of saving and things don't work out. Well, again, we're going back to the same thing of remembering the goal. Remember, you have a short period of time on the expedition. You have spent a lot of money to get there. And if you did advertise on the internet or everywhere that you're going there, people have expectations. So never, ever forget your goal, which is making QSOs. Everything else have to be second and third, but making QSOs is the main goal in any expedition. If you put the effort to make it also fun, that's good. If you put the effort to not spending too much money, that's good too. If you put the effort into it to make friends and learn new things, that's good too. But remember, it's not a vacation. It's a QSO generating affair. And of course, it's lost on the line here, and in a way it is lost in the priorities because other things that I just talked about so far are more important. I would say more important than the technical side of the expedition. We all want those CW QSO making machine. Not all of us are like that under the expedition. But you do need those people that know the radios and know the propagation so that you increase the amount of QSOs in a short time that you have given. You don't want to, CQ in the wrong band at the wrong time and waste resources. Knowing propagation is important. Now, that takes us to the next slide, the bad part. This is the stuff that actually happens. Stuff that I spoke to about so far is what we want, but this is what a lot of times happens, but we don't really want to happen. So we try to list these items so that we avoid them. Money doesn't buy love. What does that mean? Well, I'm going to this expensive expedition and I want people that can afford to pay. That's great. You can afford to join, but if you're not a team player, that's going to end up really badly. You do need this person money, but if he comes there and shows up and says, I'm not good at the tools, I'm not really want to help with the antennas, maybe I should just go and ensure that we have good pictures taken in the expedition, or do either items that don't really are a priority. So money doesn't buy love. Remember that, especially if you're a team leader. There are people that are totally inflexible. They have done something all their life on one simple way or one way, good or bad, and they don't want to change. As I mentioned that before, my way or the highway is not the way to go. If you are used to doing something, but the team decided that it's something else that will bring results, you have to follow the expedition effort and not be the inflexible guy that everybody's going to be gossiping about and your back. Being a team player is also an item that is desirable. When I started going to the expeditions, I approached a few team leaders and said, I am so good of this stuff and the other stuff, and in the end I was not really successful. Later on I learned that what they were looking for, one of the number one items that they want in an operator's personality is a team player. If you go in the middle of nowhere where you're a guy that's not doing things the way they should for the team to succeed, there's nothing the team leader or the team can do. You're stuck there for the next 10, 15 days, and this is it. And so you're a type of person that nobody wants in the team. And so that's one of the most desirable qualities in a team member. If you're a person that has no expectations, that's also no good. We're not going into the expedition just to show up and take pictures and be popular on the social media. Where especially if the ham operators around the world are supporting the expedition, you're now there to deliver. So expectations are required. Again, in order to get things done, you want to be able to work, to put that extra effort. It doesn't mean that you have to be the guy lifting the heavy stuff, but you can't be sitting there in a corner sleeping while the others are trying to figure out why this antenna doesn't work, or trying to, if the team is trying to do things in a different way because things didn't work out the first way. Maybe move the tent or fix antennas broken by the wind. You have to be in there and try to help. There's always need for somebody to hold the pliers or fetch things. And so there's always need for work to be done. Too specialized people are also not desirable, and they are generally avoided in the expeditions. If you just want to do CW, that's not good, for example, because there are times when other skills, other modes are available. It could be that propagation is bad, and the only thing that station on 20 meter can do is FT8. Well, if that's the case, that station has to be running, regardless if your opinion about FT8 is that it's a gaming machine or whatever else you want to call it. So, too specialized, not good. You have to follow a plan. Why do you have to follow a plan? Because it took 2 or 3 years maybe to put up together the expedition, and a lot of thought has been going on into getting things working out. And if you get there and decide, well, weather is good, maybe we should do something else, or go and visit the local town, or no. If the goal is to reach 100,000 QSOs and there's 1 day left, and we only have 9,000 QSOs in the log, of course you want to go and visit because you never know when you're going to be there. Well, the goal says we make QSOs. You got to sit there, take the pain, and tell others that you've sacrificed for the team because the goal needed to be achieved. So follow the plan. Well, last but not least, don't get involved in politics. We all have our opinions. We all have things that influenced our lives even today. So we think about things in a total different way than others. But if you're imposing or changing the team mood because you have different ideas of how things need to be done, or then things are not going to work out properly. And so leave your baggage at home and pretend that everybody is your friend, even if they're not. At least for the time of the expedition, everybody is a friend.
Thanks, Adrian. Now Don's going to tell us about keeping our team together.
We talked earlier about czars and planning, and no matter how hard and well you plan, these are not stations that are permanent. There's no concrete bases for your towers. There's no control over the weather. Things happen. I remember on Baker, we spent a day and a half setting up. We had been told before we went to Baker that it's dry, it's arid, and the weather's going to be the least of our concerns. Getting over the reef was the things we had to worry about, and this and that. Well, just as we got everything set up in high heat and humidity and whatever, we got the storm that was never going to happen. And antennas blew over the tents, which were the same tents we had at VP8 ORK without any issues in the South Atlantic. Our digital tent got inundated with water. As a matter of fact, we turned one of the linears over and water came out the following morning. There will be issues, there will be problems, there will be computer failures, and this is why you need a maintenance team. And it's not just the people that set things up, but people that know how to solve the problems, like Ned was there solving problems when a PoE failed in the network. And so you need a team that can fix things. Not just put an antenna in the sand, but Fish and Wildlife determined there weren't enough streamers on the guy wires. Things like that. So what you need is get ahead of Murphy, plan for Murphy and things that could go wrong, but at the end of the day, you need maintenance people. You need people not just setting up the generators, but we had a generator fail on Baker, for instance. We had the network go down. Could you maybe go further back? Okay. So there's always the picking a team, picking a bunch of people who are experts in what you think might go wrong, and knowing that there are people on your team that, for instance, when you have to start rebuilding tents or rejiggering what you thought was going to work, can jump into action, like after the storm passes, or when the local noise that you are experiencing that you planned for, it's a different type of noise. Like George said, when you get to an island, the noise floor drops so low that you hear noise in the station that didn't show up before you went. Probably the things that you can control aren't your biggest headaches. It's always the freak weather event, or crabs cutting your landline, crabs coming in your tent at night. I remember on Midway, we actually had some stations that were inside buildings and others that were in tents, and so we had to rebuild the tents to keep the animals out.
And inside your shoes?
Yep, that's right. So I can't stress enough the importance of a maintenance team, and luckily most hams know how to deal with network things. We had Adrian with us and George on Jarvis, but on other expeditions I've been on, there are some things that get into the network that you just can't find easily. So again, your maintenance team has to be strong backs, has to be IT, spare operators. I remember on Midway we had one guy who said, I'm not taking the 4 a.m. shift. Nobody's going to be on. So we had to have maintenance people, if you will, to take those shifts. And then, learning the hard way. The good thing is, on a lot of these expeditions, is we've all been there, and we've all done that. I don't know, Glenn, you've been on, what, 20 at least?
Almost.
Adrian's been on 20 in the past 6 months. And we all learn on each expedition.
You know what works and what doesn't work.
That's right. And so we're not there to reinvent things. We're there to recall on our experience, gee, how did I fix this last time? So.
Okay.
Oh, I'm up for media.
Yeah.
So we're all old, and we all remember VK0IR back in 1997. Well, I was tasked with building a website. And if you remember, I published daily the Heard Island Tribune with the type font of the New York Times. And we were playing to our audience. And every media team has to play to the audience. VK0IR, we got daily logs over ham radio satellites, and we had an online log. And it was the first one. And
the first one with pictures. The pictures were really grainy.
Oh, my God.
But they were the first pictures from a DXpedition.
they were like 6K. And it was like, but it was neat because all of a sudden, here was a website that played to the audience. Back then, you relied on the team doing the same thing every day. But now, we could get live updates over the ham satellites on what was going to happen. There was no Facebook. There was no X, or whatever it was called before it, I even forget. So what happened is ham radio DXpeditions are entertainers. Yes, we're to give you a new one, but you have to play to your audience, those that want the QSO. So we had a media team. We had ON4UN as the chief pilot. I don't think there were many pilots with the expeditions before VK0IR. There certainly wasn't pictures coming off the island in real time over satellites or a log. So you need a media team for several reasons. Information passing, because now everybody wants things in real time. If you're on a DXpedition and you don't have live streaming, you're a failure. They want to see their cue before it happens. So, and we have a younger audience. We have people who are now not only working you, but judging you on your Facebook page. You have to have a focus as a media team. You're not there for your buddies back home. You're there for a much wider audience that's feeding on the information age. On Jarvis, we had our Facebook page. We put up lots of videos. We had even drone videos going up on the page. So it's getting, the media team has to be more talented. You have to have drone footage. You have to have live streaming. You have to have, and God forbid you lose the Starlink connection and those cues aren't there and they don't catch up for a day or two. The emails just are never going. So by doing this media blitz, people know in real time what's happening. They feel part of the team. And feeling part of the team means that when you do these media hits, and you can almost see it in real time, you tell people you made 40,000 cues, the money meter goes on PayPal. It really is instantaneous. The biggest day in fundraising for these DXpeditions is the first queue. It's like somebody turns PayPal on. Everybody's waiting, well, if they don't get to operate, why should I give $5? But boy, those $5 start rolling in really fast at the first queue when you reach 100,000, and then of course, when you turn on OQRS, because people don't just order a card, they throw in an extra $5. If they feel part of the team. There are DXpeditions that go places that don't do a media presence and then sit back and wonder why people aren't donating. Because they didn't feel they were part of your, whether you were successful or not. I mean, there have been DXpeditions that keep people appraised of the local noise, the thunderstorms, the damage, and they don't make 100,000 queues, but they felt like I was there with these guys. And so that's the whole idea of, like everything else in life, there's an economic component of this. And then lastly, there's always these guys, when you're dealing with social media, that are going to tell you what you're doing wrong, why you're not working that part of the world, even when you are, and why you're screw-ups. And you know, we saw that on Jarvis, and we ignored them. And they eventually get tired of kibitzing and telling you what's wrong, and they go away because if you engage them, you're just feeding the bear.
Yep.
And so they don't exist. And everybody forgets those guys anyway. So.
So there's a few takeaways from this session. You know, we want to have fun, and having a good team that engages in everything and everybody has everybody's back, you know, that's so important. And so if you don't have that, you know, it's very difficult to proceed. And the goal, whether it's a contest or DXpedition or operation from a resort, you know, that defines the logistics a lot of times. And your team, you just have to, you know, I want to go on a DXpedition. Well, maybe you don't quite fit in with those guys or vice versa, you know, but, you know, team selection is so important. And Murphy, even though you don't like Murphy, he's always on your team. And you don't plan for just one contingency, like plan A, B, C, D, you know. I could go on and on about how things have worked and not worked and how we got around things. And then the most important thing is, you know, the audience is part of the team. They need to feel the participation too. Before we get into questions, somebody lost a wallet that was turned in up here. I haven't opened up to see who it is. Anybody recognize this wallet? Any questions?
We have a winner. We wanted to save you taxes, so we took the money out.
I think it was Greg at the beginning mentioned about the logistics of getting equipment to the final destination, suitcases, pallets, containers and stuff. Do you ever give consideration of what goes into what suitcase such that you're not caught dead where the critical component is the suitcase that got lost and you have duplicate components but you spread them out into different containers to make sure you don't, you're not DOA.
And most of the DXpeditions I've been on, we've had guys in logistics that are type A++. And besides a list, a spreadsheet of what is all being taken, it has what container it's in. And then we have a second page that has every container and what's in it. Because, you know, but I'll tell you, as the stations and antennas get built, Murphy is there to shuffle things too, you know. So it's not always in container 2C, you know, the nut and bolt you're looking for, but it could be. But, you know, it's labeling and planning ahead, you know, a list of everything so you know that you have everything, and then where it's at is very important. Any other questions?
Does it have a battery? Hello? Oh, there. Rick, N6RK. I saw this workshop just now about how to run your social media as a fundraising operation. and all the do's and don'ts of that. My problem is I contribute plenty of money for these expeditions, and I've never even been on social media, but my problem is up until the first QSO or the station's on the air, there's constant traffic from the remote site about how are we doing today, we got these antennas up or whatever. As soon as they get on the air, there's like no information at all. What band are they on? What bands are they going to be on? What bands are they not going to be able to be on? So all I can do is try to look at spots and see if anybody's spotted them. So that's kind of my comment on how to do the social media that I've had a problem with.
Okay.
So spots are just one source to find out where a DXpedition is operating. I think it's expected today, it's almost required today to do real-time uploads and have leaderboard on Club Log. And Club Log will tell you where the stations are in real time.